The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Princess Catherine stood before her ornate mirror, carefully considering her wardrobe choices for the day ahead. Today was no ordinary day. The annual Commonwealth reception at Buckingham Palace would bring together hundreds of distinguished guests from around the world, and every detail of her appearance would be scrutinized by both the media and the public. She ran her fingers along the emerald green silk of her chosen gown, a piece that had been specially designed for this occasion. The dress featured elegant beadwork that caught the light beautifully, and she knew it would photograph well under the bright lights of the ballroom. Down the hallway, Prince William was engaged in his own morning preparations, though his routine was considerably more straightforward. His navy suit had been pressed to perfection, and his shoes polished until they gleamed. He reviewed his notes one final time, mentally preparing for the conversations he would need to navigate throughout the evening. As the future king, these diplomatic gatherings were crucial opportunities to strengthen relationships with Commonwealth nations, and he took his responsibility seriously. The weight of his future role was never far from his mind, but he had learned to carry it with grace and dignity. In the nursery wing of the palace, 8-year-old Princess Charlotte was experiencing her own kind of preparation excitement. Her nanny had laid out a beautiful powder blue dress with intricate lace details, and Charlotte had gasped with delight when she first saw it. The dress was more formal than anything she typically wore, and she understood that tonight would be special. Her small tiara, a simplified version of the grand pieces worn by the adult royals, sat carefully on her dressing table, waiting to be placed in her perfectly styled hair. Charlotte had been practicing her curtsy in the mirror, determined to make her parents proud with her royal etiquette. The decision to include Charlotte in this particular event had not been made lightly. Prince William and Catherine had spent weeks discussing whether their daughter was ready for such a high-profile public appearance. The Commonwealth reception was one of the most important diplomatic events of the year, attended by ambassadors, prime ministers, and other world leaders. The couple understood that bringing Charlotte would inevitably shift some attention away from the diplomatic purposes of the evening, but they also recognized the importance of gradually introducing their children to their royal duties and heritage. Charlotte herself had been thrilled when her parents told her she would be accompanying them to the palace. She had attended smaller, more private royal functions before, but nothing on this scale. Her excitement was tempered by a serious understanding of the importance of the occasion. Her parents had spent time explaining to her what the Commonwealth was, showing her maps and pictures of the different countries that would be represented at the reception. Charlotte had been fascinated to learn about the various cultures and traditions she might encounter during the evening. The palace staff had been working for weeks to ensure every detail of the reception was perfect. The grand ballroom had been transformed into a stunning showcase of British elegance, with fresh flowers arranged in magnificent displays and the finest china and crystal set out for the refreshments. The guest list read like a who's who of international diplomacy, with representatives from 54 Commonwealth nations expected to attend. Security arrangements were extensive but discreet, designed to allow guests to feel welcome while ensuring everyone's safety. As the afternoon progressed, the anticipation throughout Kensington Palace was palpable. Catherine's lady-in-waiting arrived to help with final preparations, bringing with her a selection of jewelry options for the evening. They settled on a pair of diamond earrings that had belonged to Princess Diana, a choice that added both sparkle and sentimental significance to Catherine's ensemble. The earrings caught the light beautifully and complemented the emerald dress perfectly, creating an overall look that was both elegant and appropriately formal for the occasion. Charlotte spent the early evening hours with her governess, reviewing the proper protocols for meeting distinguished guests. She practiced her handshake, her curtsy, and the appropriate responses to common questions she might receive. Her natural intelligence and eagerness to learn made these lessons enjoyable rather than burdensome. She was particularly excited about the possibility of meeting children from other countries, hoping that some of the diplomats might have brought their families to London for the occasion. The media attention surrounding the evening was already building, with photographers and reporters gathering outside Buckingham Palace hours before the event was scheduled to begin. News outlets around the world were preparing to cover the reception, knowing that any appearance by the Wales family would generate significant public interest. The addition of Princess Charlotte to the guest list had been announced only that morning, adding an extra element of anticipation to the coverage. As evening approached, the final preparations at Kensington Palace reached their crescendo. Catherine's makeup artist applied the finishing touches to her understated but polished look, while her hairdresser ensured every strand was perfectly in place. William adjusted his tie one final time and checked his watch, knowing that their timing would need to be precise. Royal arrivals were choreographed down to the minute, and any delay would affect the entire evening's schedule. Charlotte stood patiently as her nanny made final adjustments to her dress and placed the small tiara carefully in her hair. The transformation was remarkable. The energetic 8-year-old who had been running around the palace gardens that morning now looked every inch a young princess, poised and elegant beyond her years. Yet her excitement was still evident in her bright eyes and the slight smile that played at the corners of her mouth as she admired her reflection in the mirror. The family gathered in the main hallway of Kensington Palace, where they would depart for the short journey to Buckingham Palace. Catherine knelt down to Charlotte's level, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from her daughter's dress and whispering words of encouragement. William placed a gentle hand on Charlotte's shoulder, reminding her that she should simply be herself and enjoy the experience. The three of them together created a picture of royal elegance that would soon captivate not only the distinguished guests awaiting their arrival, but audiences around the world who would see the images and videos from this memorable evening. The black royal car glided smoothly through the gates of Buckingham Palace as the evening light cast a golden glow over the ancient stone walls. Inside the vehicle, Prince William sat with perfect posture, his hands folded calmly in his lap as he gazed out at the familiar surroundings of his grandmother's former residence. The palace grounds were bustling with activity as staff members made final preparations for the evening's grand reception. Security personnel moved with quiet efficiency, their presence reassuring but unobtrusive, as they ensured everything was ready for the arrival of hundreds of distinguished guests. Princess Catherine adjusted her emerald gown one final time, the silk fabric rustling softly as she smoothed it over her knees. Her diamond earrings caught the light filtering through the car windows, creating tiny sparkles that danced across her face. She had attended countless royal events over the years, but tonight felt different somehow. Perhaps it was the presence of their daughter, or perhaps it was the significance of this particular gathering, but there was an extra flutter of anticipation in her chest as they approached the palace entrance. 8-year-old Princess Charlotte pressed her face close to the window, her eyes wide with wonder as she took in the grandeur of Buckingham Palace. She had visited many times before, but tonight everything seemed more magical, more important. The palace windows glowed warmly from within, and she could see the shadows of people moving about inside the magnificent rooms. Her small hands were folded carefully in her lap, just as her mother had taught her, but her excitement was barely contained. She had been looking forward to this evening for weeks, and now that it was finally here, she could hardly believe it was real. The car came to a gentle stop at the palace's main entrance, where a red carpet had been rolled out in preparation for their arrival. Palace staff stood at attention, ready to assist with their entrance, while photographers positioned themselves at a respectful distance to capture the moment. The grand doors of the palace stood open, revealing glimpses of the opulent interior where guests were already gathering for the reception. The sound of classical music drifted out from within, mixing with the gentle evening breeze and the distant hum of London traffic. William stepped out first, his movements confident and practiced as he acknowledged the palace staff with warm nods and smiles. His navy suit was immaculate, and his bearing was that of a man comfortable with his role and responsibilities. He had been preparing for evenings like this his entire life, and it showed in every gesture and expression. The photographers captured his arrival with quiet efficiency, their cameras clicking softly as they documented this important moment in the royal calendar. Catherine emerged from the car with graceful elegance, her emerald dress flowing beautifully. As she took William's offered arm, the evening light seemed to enhance the rich color of her gown, and her diamond earrings sparkled brilliantly against her dark hair. She paused for just a moment, allowing the photographers to capture her arrival, before moving toward the palace entrance. Her smile was warm and genuine, reflecting both her comfort in her royal role and her anticipation for the evening ahead. But it was Charlotte's emergence from the royal car that truly captured everyone's attention. The 8-year-old princess stepped out with careful precision, her powder blue dress a perfect complement to the evening's elegant atmosphere. Her small tiara caught the light beautifully, and her hair had been styled to perfection by the palace's expert hairdressers. What struck everyone immediately was not just her adorable appearance, but her remarkable composure for such a young child. She moved with quiet confidence, her posture straight and her expression alert and interested rather than overwhelmed by the grand surroundings. The palace staff who had worked with the royal family for years found themselves smiling involuntarily at Charlotte's presence. There was something genuinely charming about seeing this young member of the royal family taking her first steps into the world of high-level diplomacy and international relations. Her natural grace was evident in every movement, from the way she carefully lifted her dress to navigate the palace steps to the polite way she acknowledged the staff members who greeted her family. As the family approached the grand entrance to the palace, the sound of conversation and laughter from within grew louder. The Commonwealth reception was already in full swing, with distinguished guests from around the world mingling in the magnificent staterooms. The anticipation of their arrival had been building throughout the evening, and now that moment had finally come. Charlotte looked up at her parents, her eyes bright with excitement and perhaps just a touch of nervousness about the important evening ahead. The palace's interior was even more magnificent than Charlotte had remembered from her previous visits. The chandeliers cast a warm golden light over everything, and the walls were adorned with priceless paintings and tapestries that told the story of centuries of British history. Fresh flowers filled every corner with their sweet fragrance, and the soft strains of classical music created an atmosphere of refined elegance that was perfect for this diplomatic gathering. Palace photographers moved discreetly to capture the family's arrival, understanding the historic significance of Charlotte's participation in such a high-profile event. The images they captured would be studied and admired by royal watchers around the world, marking an important milestone in the young princess's gradual introduction to her royal duties and responsibilities. Every detail of her appearance and behavior would be noted and discussed in newspapers and magazines for days to come. The family paused just inside the palace entrance, taking a moment to prepare themselves for the evening ahead. William straightened his tie one final time, while Catherine made a small adjustment to Charlotte's tiara, ensuring it was perfectly positioned. Charlotte stood patiently, her hands clasped in front of her as she had been taught, but her eyes were constantly moving, taking in every detail of the magnificent surroundings and the preparations for their grand entrance into the reception. Sounds from the ballroom grew louder as they approached, indicating that the assembled guests were eagerly awaiting their arrival. Charlotte could hear the mixture of languages and accents that represented the diverse Commonwealth nations, and she felt a thrill of excitement at the thought of meeting people from so many different countries. Her parents had prepared her well for this moment, But nothing could quite compare to the reality of being at the center of such an important international gathering. As they prepared to make their entrance into the ballroom, Charlotte took a deep breath and squared her small shoulders. She understood that this was an important moment, not just for her family but for the monarchy itself. The evening ahead would be filled with important conversations, diplomatic exchanges, and ceremonial moments that would strengthen the bonds between the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth nations. And somehow, this 8-year-old princess was about to become an unexpected but delightful part of that historic evening. The massive golden doors to the palace ballroom swung open with ceremonial grandeur, and instantly every conversation in the room came to a halt. The assembled guests, representing 54 Commonwealth nations, turned as one toward the entrance, their faces filled with anticipation and respect. Ambassadors from Canada and Australia stood alongside High Commissioners from Jamaica and South Africa, while ministers from India and New Zealand paused mid-sentence to witness this moment. The ballroom itself was a masterpiece of royal elegance, with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over silk wallpaper and priceless artwork that had adorned these walls for generations. Prince William stepped through the doorway first, his tall frame commanding immediate attention from every person in the room. His confident stride and warm smile drew appreciative nods from the distinguished guests who had been waiting for this moment. The photographers positioned around the ballroom began capturing images, their cameras clicking quietly as they documented his entrance. William's navy suit was perfectly tailored, and his bearing reflected years of preparation for moments exactly like this one. He moved with the practiced ease of someone who had been attending such gatherings his entire life, acknowledging familiar faces with subtle nods while maintaining the dignified composure expected of a future king. Princess Catherine appeared beside him, and the room seemed to collectively hold its breath at her stunning appearance. Her emerald green gown caught the ballroom's lights beautifully, the silk fabric flowing elegantly as she moved. The dress had been chosen specifically for this occasion, its rich color complementing the formal atmosphere while ensuring she would photograph beautifully under the bright lights. Her diamond earrings, which had once belonged to Princess Diana, sparkled brilliantly against her perfectly styled dark hair. Catherine's smile was radiant and genuine, reflecting both her comfort in her royal role and her pleasure at seeing so many familiar faces among the diplomatic community. The couple moved together with synchronized grace, their years of attending such events evident in every step. They acknowledged the assembled guests with warm smiles and gentle waves, creating an atmosphere of welcome and appreciation that set the tone for the entire evening. Conversations began to resume in hushed tones as guests commented on the royal couple's elegant appearance and the significance of their presence at this important Commonwealth gathering. The energy in the room was palpable, with everyone understanding they were witnessing an important moment in diplomatic history. But then, something completely unexpected happened that would transform the entire evening. 8-year-old Princess Charlotte stepped into view from behind her parents, having been hidden by their formal procession until this moment. The collective gasp that went up from the assembled guests was audible throughout the vast ballroom. Here was the young princess, looking absolutely radiant in her powder blue dress with its delicate lace details and tiny pearl buttons that caught the light with every movement. Her small tiara sparkled like stars against her perfectly arranged hair, and the sight of this young member of the royal family participating in such a formal diplomatic event was both surprising and utterly charming. What struck everyone immediately was not just Charlotte's adorable appearance, but her remarkable composure for such a young child. While many 8-year-olds might have been overwhelmed by the grandeur of the ballroom and the attention of hundreds of adults, Charlotte walked with quiet confidence and dignity. Her posture was straight, her steps measured and careful, and her expression was one of genuine interest rather than nervousness or intimidation. She had clearly been well prepared for this moment, and her natural grace was evident in every movement as she followed her parents into the room. The transformation in the ballroom's atmosphere was immediate and profound. While the guests had been appropriately impressed by William and Catherine's royal presence, Charlotte's appearance sparked something entirely different in the room. Seasoned diplomats who had attended countless formal receptions found themselves smiling involuntarily at the sight of this poised young princess. Hard-faced security personnel standing along the walls softened their expressions, and even the most protocol-conscious attendees could not help but be charmed by Charlotte's natural elegance and obvious excitement at being part of such an important occasion. That the young princess moved with careful precision, clearly mindful of the formal nature of the event, but also genuinely curious about everything around her. Her eyes moved constantly, taking in the magnificent decorations, the elegant gowns and formal attire of the guests, and the overall grandeur of the ballroom. She had visited Buckingham Palace many times before, but tonight everything seemed more special, more important, and her wonder at being included in such a significant diplomatic gathering was evident in her bright expression and alert posture. As Charlotte walked alongside her parents, several guests near the entrance began to whisper among themselves about her unexpected presence. The French ambassador's wife leaned toward her husband, commenting on how perfectly dressed the young princess was for the occasion. The Canadian High Commissioner smiled warmly as Charlotte passed, remembering his own granddaughter who was about the same age. Throughout the room, similar reactions were occurring as distinguished guests found themselves unexpectedly delighted by this charming addition to the royal family's entrance. The palace photographers, who had been prepared to capture the usual formal images of William and Catherine's arrival, quickly adjusted their focus to include Charlotte in their shots. They understood instinctively that these images would be historic, marking an important milestone in the young princess's gradual introduction to royal duties. Every angle was carefully considered as they documented not just her appearance, but her behavior and the reactions of the assembled guests to her presence. Charlotte's dress was a masterpiece of children's formal wear, created specifically for this occasion by one of the palace's preferred designers. The powder blue silk had been chosen to complement her parents' attire while ensuring she would stand out beautifully in photographs. The lace details were hand-sewn, and the tiny pearl buttons had been specially selected to catch the ballroom's lights. Her small tiara, while much simpler than the grand pieces worn by adult royals, was perfectly proportioned for her age and added just the right touch of royal elegance to her overall appearance. The music in the ballroom seemed to swell as the royal family completed their entrance, and the assembled guests began to arrange themselves for the informal receiving line that would follow. Charlotte stood between her parents, her small hands clasped politely in front of her as she had been taught, but her eyes continued to move around the room with obvious fascination. She was clearly absorbing every detail of this important evening, understanding that she was participating in something significant, while also genuinely enjoying the experience of meeting people from so many different countries and cultures. The evening had officially begun. But already it was clear that while Prince William and Princess Catherine had made their expected impressive entrance, it was 8-year-old Princess Charlotte who had captured the hearts and imagination of everyone in the room. The formal diplomatic reception was about to become something much more special and memorable than anyone had anticipated. The receiving line began to form as distinguished guests eagerly awaited their opportunity to meet the royal family. But all eyes remained fixed on Princess Charlotte as she prepared for her first major diplomatic interactions. The 8-year-old princess stood gracefully between her parents, her powder blue dress catching the ballroom's magnificent lighting while her small tiara sparkled like captured starlight. What amazed everyone watching was how naturally she seemed to understand the importance of the moment without appearing nervous or overwhelmed by the attention of hundreds of distinguished adults from around the world. The first guest to approach was the High Commissioner from Australia, a distinguished gentleman with kind eyes who had been looking forward to meeting the young princess. Charlotte executed a perfect curtsy, her small hands gracefully lifting the sides of her dress, just as she had practiced countless times with her governess. When the High Commissioner complimented her beautiful dress, Charlotte responded with a clear thank you and a genuine smile that immediately put him at ease. Her voice was soft but confident, and her polite manner impressed everyone within hearing distance of the conversation. As more guests approached, Charlotte's natural charm became increasingly evident. The ambassador from Canada brought his wife forward to meet the princess, and Charlotte politely shook hands with both of them, remembering to maintain eye contact, just as her parents had taught her. When the ambassador's wife mentioned that she had a granddaughter about Charlotte's age, the young princess's face lit up with genuine interest. She asked thoughtful questions about the granddaughter, and seemed genuinely pleased to learn that children around the world were interested in meeting her and learning about royal life. The French ambassador and his wife were particularly taken with Charlotte's poise and grace. When they greeted her in French, Charlotte surprised everyone by responding with a few simple French phrases she had been learning with her tutors. Her pronunciation was careful and precise, and while her vocabulary was limited, her effort to communicate in their language clearly delighted the French diplomatic couple. The ambassador later commented to other guests that he had rarely seen such natural diplomatic instincts in someone so young. What truly captivated the assembled guests was Charlotte's authentic interest in learning about the different countries represented at the reception. When she met the minister from Jamaica, she asked genuine questions about the island's beautiful beaches and tropical weather, having studied about Caribbean nations in her geography lessons. The minister was so charmed by her curiosity that he spent several extra minutes describing his homeland to her, and Charlotte listened with rapt attention, asking follow-up questions that demonstrated she was truly engaged in learning about his country. The sight of Charlotte interacting with these world leaders created a ripple effect throughout the ballroom. Guests who had not yet met her moved closer, hoping to witness these delightful exchanges, while those who had already been introduced lingered nearby, reluctant to move away from the warmth and joy that seemed to surround the young princes. The formal atmosphere of the diplomatic reception was gradually transforming into something more relaxed and genuinely enjoyable, all because of one 8-year-old girl's natural ability to connect with people. Perhaps the most touching moment of the evening occurred when Charlotte noticed an elderly gentleman standing slightly apart from the main group of guests. He was the representative from a small Pacific island nation, and his advanced age made it difficult for him to navigate the crowded receiving line. Without any prompting from her parents, Charlotte gently excused herself from her current conversation and approached the elderly diplomat. She introduced herself politely and asked if he would like to sit down, gesturing towards some nearby chairs that had been arranged for guests who needed to rest. The elderly gentleman was visibly moved by Charlotte's thoughtfulness and consideration. He accepted her offer gratefully, and Charlotte spent several minutes sitting beside him, listening as he told her about his island home and the traditional dances and music of his people. Her genuine interest and respectful attention to his stories clearly meant a great deal to him, and other guests who witnessed this interaction were deeply impressed by her natural kindness and mature understanding of how to make others feel welcome and valued. As the evening progressed, Charlotte's interactions became increasingly natural and comfortable. She discovered that the Indian High Commissioner's wife was wearing a beautiful sari, and she politely asked about the intricate patterns and bright colors of the traditional garment. The woman was delighted to explain the cultural significance of her clothing, and Charlotte listened with fascination, asking thoughtful questions that showed she was genuinely interested in learning about different cultures and traditions from around the world. The South African ambassador brought his teenage daughter to meet Charlotte, and the two young people immediately found common ground in their shared experiences of growing up in diplomatic families. Charlotte asked the older girl about her travels and what it was like to move to different countries with her father's work. The conversation between the two was so natural and engaging that several adults stopped to listen, charmed by the easy friendship that developed between the princess and the ambassador's daughter. Throughout all these interactions, Charlotte's parents watched with obvious pride and amazement at their daughter's natural diplomatic abilities. Prince William and Princess Catherine had hoped that Charlotte would handle herself well at her first major international event, but her performance exceeded all their expectations. She was connecting with people of all ages and backgrounds with genuine warmth and interest, demonstrating an intuitive understanding of how to make others feel comfortable and appreciated. The palace staff, accustomed to managing formal diplomatic receptions, found themselves quietly marveling at how Charlotte's presence was transforming the entire atmosphere of the evening. Conversations throughout the ballroom became more animated and friendly, with guests sharing stories about their own children and grandchildren inspired by their interactions with the young princes. The formal protocols of international diplomacy were still being observed, but there was an added warmth and humanity to the proceedings that made everyone feel more relaxed and welcomed. As photographers continued to capture these precious moments, they understood they were documenting something truly special. The images of Charlotte's gracious interactions with world leaders would become historic records of her first major step into the world of international diplomacy. Every smile, every curtsy, every thoughtful question was being preserved for posterity, creating a visual record of a remarkable evening that would be remembered and discussed for years to come. The receiving line continued, but it was clear that Charlotte had already accomplished something extraordinary. She had not only handled herself with perfect grace and dignity, but she had also brought joy and warmth to an event that could have been merely formal and protocol-driven. Her natural ability to connect with people from diverse backgrounds and cultures suggested that she possessed the essential qualities needed for a lifetime of royal service and international relations. As the formal receiving line concluded and guests began to mingle more freely throughout the magnificent ballroom, Princess Charlotte's evening was far from over. The young princes had already charmed dozens of world leaders during the introductions, but now came the true test of her social skills as she navigated the less structured portion of the reception. The ballroom buzzed with animated conversations in multiple languages as diplomats, ministers and ambassadors shared stories and strengthened the bonds between their nations and the United Kingdom. Charlotte found herself naturally drawn to a small group gathered near one of the ballroom's towering windows, where the wife of the New Zealand High Commissioner was showing photographs of her homeland to interested guests. The 8-year-old princess approached with quiet confidence, her powder blue dress rustling softly as she moved across the polished marble floor. When she politely asked if she might see the pictures as well, the woman was delighted to share images of New Zealand's stunning landscapes with someone so young and genuinely curious about the world beyond Britain's shores. The photographs sparked a wonderful conversation about travel, nature, and the diverse beauty found throughout the Commonwealth nations. Charlotte listened with rapt attention as the woman described the snow-capped mountains, pristine lakes, and unique wildlife of New Zealand. Her thoughtful questions about the Maori culture and traditional customs impressed the adults in the group, who were amazed by her genuine interest in learning about different ways of life. The conversation naturally expanded as other guests joined in, sharing their own stories about the natural wonders and cultural treasures of their respective countries. Meanwhile, across the ballroom, Charlotte's parents were engaged in their own important diplomatic conversations, but they kept watchful eyes on their daughter as she moved gracefully through the crowd. Prince William was deep in discussion with several African leaders about sustainable development initiatives, while Princess Catherine was learning about educational programs for young women from the Canadian delegation. Both parents felt immense pride as they observed Charlotte's natural ability to connect with people from such diverse backgrounds, her poise and genuine curiosity making her a delightful ambassador for her generation. the most memorable moment of the evening occurred when Charlotte discovered that the Jamaican minister had brought his 10-year-old granddaughter to London for the reception. The two girls were introduced by their respective adults, and an instant friendship bloomed between them despite their different backgrounds and cultures. Charlotte was fascinated to learn about life in the Caribbean, while the Jamaican girl was equally curious about royal life and living in a palace. Their conversation was conducted in the universal language of childhood wonder and excitement, transcending any differences in their upbringings or circumstances. The sight of these two young girls chatting animatedly near the ballroom's grand piano created one of the evening's most heartwarming scenes. They discovered they both loved horses, though Charlotte rode in the English countryside, while her new friend rode on beaches in Jamaica. They compared their favorite books, finding common ground in their love of adventure stories and fairy tales. When Charlotte learned that her new friend had never seen snow, she promised to send her pictures of the palace gardens in winter, while the Jamaican girl offered to share photographs of the tropical flowers that bloomed year-round in her island home. As the evening progressed, Charlotte's impact on the reception became increasingly evident. Conversations throughout the ballroom took on a warmer, more personal tone as guests found themselves sharing stories about their own children and families, inspired by their interactions with the young princess. The formal diplomatic protocols were still carefully observed, but there was an added dimension of human connection that made the evening more meaningful and memorable for everyone involved. The palace photographers worked tirelessly to capture the magic of these spontaneous moments, understanding that they were documenting something truly special. The images of Charlotte's genuine interactions with world leaders and their families would become treasured records of her first major international appearance. Every smile, every moment of laughter, every thoughtful exchange was being preserved for history, creating a visual narrative of an 8-year-old girl who had somehow managed to bring joy and warmth to one of the year's most important diplomatic gatherings. Social media began buzzing almost immediately as guests started sharing their experiences of meeting Princess Charlotte. Ambassadors and ministers posted photographs and stories about their interactions with the young princess, praising her poise, kindness, and genuine interest in their countries and cultures. The hashtag featuring Charlotte's name began trending worldwide within hours, as people around the globe shared and commented on the heartwarming images and videos from the reception. Outlets quickly recognized that Charlotte had become the unexpected star of the evening, and their coverage shifted from the formal diplomatic aspects of the reception to focus on the young princess's remarkable debut on the international stage. Television networks interrupted regular programming to show footage of Charlotte's gracious interactions with world leaders, while newspapers prepared special editions featuring her photograph on the front page. The overwhelming response was one of delight and admiration for her natural charm and mature behavior. As the reception began to wind down, Charlotte found herself surrounded by well-wishers eager to bid her farewell and express their pleasure at meeting her. The elderly Pacific Islander, who had been so touched by her earlier kindness, presented her with a small carved pendant, representing friendship and goodwill between nations. The French ambassador's wife offered her a beautiful silk scarf in the colors of the French flag, while the Canadian delegation gave her a maple leaf pin crafted from genuine Canadian gold. The evening's conclusion brought a series of official photographs as the royal family posed with key diplomatic representatives, but even these formal images captured the warmth and joy that Charlotte had brought to the proceedings. Her bright smile and obvious happiness at being included in such an important event shone through every photograph, creating images that would be treasured by royal historians and Commonwealth nations alike. As the family prepared to depart Buckingham Palace, Charlotte's parents reflected on the remarkable evening their daughter had just experienced. She had not only met the challenge of her first major international appearance with grace and dignity, but she had also demonstrated natural diplomatic instincts that suggested a bright future in royal service. Her ability to connect with people from diverse backgrounds while maintaining perfect protocol showed a maturity and understanding that exceeded all expectations. The ride back to Kensington Palace was filled with excited chatter as Charlotte shared her favorite memories from the evening, from learning about different countries to making new friends with children from around the world. Her parents listened with pride and amazement as she recounted her conversations and asked thoughtful questions about the Commonwealth nations she had learned about during the reception. By the time the royal family reached home, news of Charlotte's successful debut was already spreading around the world. The 8-year-old princess had not only survived her first major diplomatic test but had triumphed beyond anyone's wildest expectations, proving that sometimes the most powerful diplomacy comes not from formal speeches or official protocols, but from the simple, genuine connections made between people who approach each other with open hearts and curious minds.